On the way to marry his fiancée, the millionaire saw his ex at a bus stop, holding twins who looked exactly like him. Jim Santos is seated in the back of a luxury SUV on the way to his wedding. The church is less than 15 minutes away. His phone keeps vibrating with messages from guests, business associates, and family members wishing him well. Yet none of those messages hold his attention. A traffic light forces the vehicle to stop. Jim casually turns his head toward the sidewalk, then his entire body locks. Standing beneath a bus shelter is a woman he has not seen in 6 years. Pinky Farrell, not a memory, not a photograph, not a dream. Her, right there, breathing. Alive, close enough to recognize. Close enough to destroy his concentration in a single glance. At first, Jim only sees Pinky. Then he notices the children. A boy and a girl, twins, each holding one of her hands. The little boy says something that makes his sister laugh. Jim stares. His heartbeat begins hammering against his ribs. The boy's grin feels familiar. The girl's eyes feel familiar. Not familiar in the ordinary sense. Personal, deeply personal. The kind of familiarity that reaches into old memories and refuses to let go. Without realizing it, Jim leans closer to the window. His eyes never leave the children. The timing could not be worse. In less than an hour, he is expected at the church. Hundreds of guests are already arriving. Some have traveled across the country. His fiancée, Althea Quitson, is preparing for the ceremony. Everything is arranged. Everything is paid for. Everything is ready. For years, Jim has built an impressive life. His company develops residential communities. His investments continue to grow. His name appears in business publications. People describe him as disciplined, focused, successful. Yet none of those achievements seem important while he watches that bus stop, because no business deal has ever shaken him the way this single moment does. Beside him sits Ron, best friend, best man, one of the few people who knows Jim well enough to notice subtle changes. Ron glances over. Jim? No answer. Jim? Still nothing. Ron follows his line of sight toward the bus stop. What are you looking at? Jim slowly lifts a hand, points. Ron squints. At first he only sees a woman and 2 children. Then he notices Jim's expression and immediately understands that this is not random. Who is she? Jim swallows. Pinky. The name lands heavily between them. Ron recognizes it instantly. Ron has heard stories about Pinky before, not often. Jim rarely talks about her. But every once in a while, usually after a long day or a few drinks, her name surfaces. The woman who existed before the money, before the company expanded, before interviews and awards and public recognition. The woman Jim once planned to marry. The woman who disappeared from his life. Ron looks back toward the bus stop, then back at Jim. That's Pinky? Jim nods. Neither man speaks for several seconds. Some memories never lose their weight. And some people never completely leave your heart. As though she feels someone watching her, Pinky lifts her head. Her eyes move across the street, then stop, directly on Jim. Time seems to freeze. For a brief second, neither of them moves, neither of them speaks. The years separating them vanish. Shock crosses Pinky's face. Then concern. Then something harder to identify. A complicated emotion she hides almost immediately. She grips the twins' hands more tightly. The reaction is impossible to miss, and impossible for Jim to ignore. A city bus pulls up. The doors open. Pinky immediately guides Noah and Emma forward. The twins appear confused by her sudden urgency. Mom? Emma asks. Come on, sweetheart. But why are we? Let's go. Jim presses his palm against the glass. Not because he plans to get out, not because he knows what to say, because he isn't ready for her to disappear again. Noah climbs aboard. Emma follows. Pinky steps onto the bus last. For one final moment she glances back. Then the doors close. The bus pulls away. And just like that, she is gone. Again. The SUV remains stopped. Traffic moves. Pedestrians continue walking. Life carries on. But Jim's thoughts refuse to move forward. His mind remains fixed on 2 faces. The boy, the girl, the similarities, the timing, the ages, the impossible possibility forming inside his head. Ron studies him carefully. Neither man mentions the obvious question, not immediately, because saying it aloud somehow makes it real. Jim exhales slowly, yet the more he thinks about it, the less he can dismiss it. The traffic light changes. The driver prepares to continue toward the church, toward the ceremony, toward the future everyone expects Jim to choose. But Jim is no longer thinking about the wedding. He is thinking about Pinky. He is thinking about 2 children. And he is thinking about a question that has suddenly become impossible to silence. Ron finally breaks the silence. His voice is quiet, careful, almost reluctant. Jim. He pauses, then looks directly at his friend. Are you thinking what I'm thinking? Before we find out what decision Jim makes next, take a moment to subscribe to Mr. Williams Storytime, like the video, and tell us in the comments. If you were on your way to your wedding and suddenly saw someone from your past standing there with children who looked exactly like you, what would you do? Because Jim Santos is about to make a choice that could change every life involved. The SUV finally pulls away from the intersection. For years, Jim Santos has been known for making decisions quickly. Give him a property deal, a contract, a negotiation, a business crisis, he'll find a solution. But this is different. This isn't business. This is personal. And personal problems don't follow spreadsheets. The church comes into view. Cars line both sides of the street. Guests gather near the entrance. Some laugh while taking photographs. Others check their phones or greet relatives. Everything appears exactly as it should. Yet Jim feels strangely disconnected from it all, as if he's watching someone else's wedding. Ron notices immediately. You can still tell me what's going on. Jim keeps staring ahead. I don't know. You don't know what? I don't know why seeing her affected me this much. Ron doesn't answer right away, because deep down, both men already know the answer. Inside a private preparation room, Althea Quitson is surrounded by people who care about her. Her sister adjusts a small detail on her dress. A close friend hands her a glass of water. Someone jokes about how nervous Jim probably is. Laughter fills the room. Althea smiles. Unlike many brides, she isn't worried. She trusts Jim completely. Their relationship has never been built on drama. No games, no constant arguments, no uncertainty. For 3 years, they have built a stable relationship. The kind people admire, the kind families approve of, the kind that looks perfect from the outside. Her phone vibrates. A message from Jim's mother. Can't wait to officially call you my daughter. Althea smiles again. Almost time. She has no idea that everything is already beginning to change. As Jim enters a private room near the sanctuary, he loosens his tie. Suddenly it feels tighter than before. Ron closes the door behind them. The room becomes quiet. Too quiet. Jim sits down, then immediately stands up again. He can't seem to settle. The twins keep appearing in his mind, especially the little girl, the shape of her eyes. The little boys smile, their ages. 5 years old, 5. The number keeps repeating in his thoughts. Ron leans against the wall. You think they're yours? It isn't a question. Jim rubs his jaw. I don't know. You think they might be? Jim says nothing. His silence answers for him. Outside, the ceremony schedule continues moving forward. Guests are guided toward their seats. Music rehearsals finish. Final preparations are completed. A wedding coordinator checks her watch. Everything is running perfectly, which makes Jim's growing uncertainty even harder to ignore. One of the coordinators knocks. We begin in 20 minutes. Jim forces a smile. Thank you. The door closes. 20 minutes. 20 minutes until he promises forever. 20 minutes until his life follows a path he carefully planned. Yet one unexpected encounter has thrown every certainty into question. Ron sits beside him. Do you love Althea? Yes. The answer comes immediately. Ron nods, then asks the harder question. Do you still love Pinky? Senses something unusual. Not panic, not fear, just instinct. Over the years she has learned to read people well, and something about today's atmosphere feels different. Jim's last text was shorter than normal. His voice during their morning call sounded distracted. Nothing dramatic, just small details. But small details matter. She picks up her phone, calls him. The call connects. Hey, she says warmly. Hey. For a moment neither speaks. Then she smiles. You okay? Jim closes his eyes. Such a simple question, such a difficult one to answer honestly. Yeah, the word leaves his mouth, but it doesn't feel true. Althea hears the hesitation, and for the first time all day, concern enters her thoughts. Minutes later, guests rise from their seats. The ceremony is beginning. Jim stands near the entrance. His heart pounds harder with every passing second. Ron adjusts his jacket. You still have time. Time for what? To be honest with yourself. Jim exhales slowly. Ahead of him waits a future most people would envy. A beautiful partner, financial security, respect, success, everything he once wanted. Yet he keeps seeing a bus stop, a woman he loved, and 2 children who should not matter this much, but somehow do. The music begins. The doors open. Every eye turns toward him. Jim takes several steps forward. The guests smile. Family members watch proudly. His mother wipes away tears. Everything unfolds exactly as planned. Until it doesn't. As he reaches the front, his gaze drifts across the room. then inward, toward thoughts he can no longer control. What if those children are mine? The question strikes harder this time. What if Pinky spent years raising them alone? What if she tried to find me? What if I walk away from this question forever? His chest tightens. The room suddenly feels smaller. The sounds around him fade. One thought rises above every other thought. I need answers. Althea reaches the front, beautiful, confident, ready. But the moment she looks into Jim's eyes, she knows something is wrong. Not because of what he says, because of what he doesn't say. She sees conflict, confusion, distance, a man physically present but mentally somewhere else. The officiant begins speaking. Guests listen. The ceremony continues. Yet Althea keeps watching Jim. Finally, she leans slightly closer, her voice barely above a whisper. Talk to me. Jim looks at her. Really looks at her. And realizes something painful. She deserves a husband who is completely certain. At this moment, he isn't. The officiant pauses. Everyone waits. Jim takes a slow breath. Then another. The silence grows. Confused looks spread through the audience. Althea's expression softens. Because now she understands. Not every detail, but enough. Jim lowers his head briefly, then speaks. I'm sorry. A wave of confusion sweeps through the room. Jim turns toward the guests, toward his family, toward the future he was supposed to choose today. Then he does something nobody expected. He steps away from the altar. Ron immediately follows. Gasps echo throughout the church. Questions begin flying. But Jim keeps walking, because somewhere in the city, answers are waiting, and he can no longer pretend otherwise. Before we continue, make sure you're subscribed to Mr. Williams Storytime and leave a comment below. Did Jim make the right decision by walking away before the vows, or should he have gone through with the wedding first and searched for answers later? Because Jim Santos has just walked away from the biggest day of his life, and the search for the truth is only beginning. The moment Jim leaves the church, his phone begins exploding with calls. Family, friends, business partners, people demanding explanations. He ignores every one of them. For the first time in years, nothing feels more important than finding Pinky Farrell. Ron remains beside him. The two men drive across the city following the only lead they have, the bus route they saw earlier. Hours pass. No luck. They check several stops. Nothing. A small grocery store. Nothing. A pharmacy. Nothing. The sun begins sinking lower. Still nothing. Most people would have given up. Jim doesn't, because 6 years ago he lost Pinky once. He's not willing to lose her again. While searching, memories begin surfacing. Not the painful memories, the good ones. The first time he met her. Back when life looked completely different. Jim was 23, ambitious, driven, working non-stop to build something meaningful. One afternoon he stepped into a neighborhood bookstore looking for a real estate book someone had recommended. Instead, he found Pinky. She stood behind the counter helping an elderly customer find a novel. When the customer finally left, she smiled at Jim. Can I help you? Jim forgot the title of the book. For several embarrassing seconds, he simply stared. Pinky laughed. That bad, huh? Jim laughed too. And somehow that awkward moment became the beginning of everything. Unlike many relationships, theirs didn't begin with games. No pretending, no mixed signals, no constant uncertainty. Being together felt easy, comfortable, natural. They spent afternoons walking through local markets, shared cheap meals at family-owned diners, talked for hours about goals and dreams. Pinky loved books. Jim loved building things. She believed stories change lives. He believed hard work changed lives. Oddly enough, they understood each other perfectly. Pinky should go in buildings like maybe. No, she shook her head confidently. You will. What makes you so sure? Pinky smiled. Because you don't know how to quit. Years later, Jim would remember that conversation more often than he admitted. Their favorite place wasn't expensive. It wasn't luxurious. It wasn't impressive. It was a quiet lake outside the city. Whenever life became stressful, they went there. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they sat silently. One evening they watched children playing near the shoreline. Pinky smiled. How many kids do you want someday? Jim nearly choked on his drink. You're planning pretty far ahead. I'm curious. Maybe 2. Only 2. You sound disappointed. Pinky laughed. I thought you'd say 5. 5? Okay, maybe 4. Absolutely not. Their laughter echoed across the water. Simple moments. Ordinary moments, the kind people never realize they'll miss until they're gone. As Jim's career started growing, life became busier. His company expanded, more meetings appeared, more responsibilities arrived, more opportunities demanded attention. At first, Pinky supported every step. She encouraged him, celebrated victories, reminded him to rest, but growth came with sacrifices. Date nights became less frequent. Phone calls became shorter. Plans were postponed. Neither intended to hurt the other. Yet small frustrations slowly accumulated, not because they stopped loving each other, because they stopped communicating honestly. Both assumed the other person would understand. Both were wrong. One particular month proved especially difficult. Jim was traveling constantly. Pinky felt increasingly distant from his life. Conversations became shorter. Tension grew. Then came the photograph, a single image sent by someone Jim trusted. The picture showed Pinky sitting closely beside another man. Laughing, comfortable, happy. Without context, the image looked damaging. Without patience, it looked even worse. Jim confronted her immediately. Anger spoke louder than reason. Pinky tried explaining. The man was her cousin visiting from another state. The situation wasn't what it appeared to be. But hurt people don't always listen carefully, and pride rarely helps difficult conversations. Their worst argument followed. Words were exchanged, accusations were made, pain replaced understanding. For the first time since meeting, they weren't fighting to solve a problem. They were fighting each other. Pinky cried. Jim raised his voice. Neither handled the situation well. When the conversation finally ended, both walked away wounded. The next few days became a battle of silence, waiting, hoping, expecting the other person to reach out first. Neither did, and every day made reconciliation harder. Until eventually the distance became permanent. At least that's what Jim believed. A sudden notification on Ron's phone pulls Jim back to reality. "Still thinking about her?" Ron asks. Jim looks out the window. Every minute, the search continues, street after street, block after block. Then finally, late in the afternoon, Ron points ahead. "Jim." Jim immediately sits forward. Across the street stands a small neighborhood grocery store. Near the entrance, he sees someone familiar. A woman carrying shopping bags. 2 children walking beside her, Pinky, Noah, Emma. This time she can't disappear before he reaches her. Jim steps out of the vehicle. His pulse races. 6 years of unanswered questions. 6 years of wondering where she went. 6 years of convincing himself he had moved on. Now only a few feet separate them. Pinky looks up. The moment she sees him, she stops walking. Noah notices first. "Mom?" Emma looks between the adults. Neither child understands why both grown-ups suddenly seem unable to speak. For several long seconds, nobody moves, nobody smiles, nobody looks away. Because some reunions don't begin with hugs, they begin with unfinished history. And standing there outside that grocery store, Jim realizes he may finally be face to face with the answers he's been chasing all day. Before we continue, subscribe to Mr. Williams Storytime if you're enjoying the journey so far, and tell us in the comments. If someone from your past suddenly reappeared after 6 years, what would be the first question you'd ask them? Because Jim Santos is finally standing in front of Pinky Farrell, and the conversation they are about to have could change everything. For several seconds, the world around them seems to fade into the background. Customers enter the grocery store. Others leave carrying bags. Cars pass along the street. Yet Jim and Pinky remain frozen. 6 years of silence stand between them. Noah looks up at Pinky. "Mom, do you know him?" Pinky opens her mouth. Nothing comes out. Jim feels his chest tighten. Of all the conversations he imagined having one day, this was never how he pictured it. Finally, Pinky finds her voice. "Yes." Noah waits. Emma waits. Jim waits. Pinky swallows. "I knew him a long time ago. The answer is technically true." But all 4 adults in this situation know it barely scratches the surface. Emma steps forward first. Unlike her brother, she doesn't seem intimidated. She studies Jim curiously, the way children often do when trying to understand someone new. "You're tall." The unexpected comment catches Jim off guard. "What?" Emma nods. "You're really tall." For the first time all day, a small laugh escapes him. "I guess I am." Noah points toward the shopping bags. "We help carry those." "Proud of that?" Jim asks. Noah grins. "Yep." The confidence reminds Jim of himself at that age, a detail he wishes he hadn't noticed, because every similarity makes the questions louder. Pinky adjusts her grip on the grocery bags. "We should go." Jim immediately looks at her. "Please." One word, nothing more. Yet she knows exactly what he's asking. A conversation, an explanation, answers. Pinky closes her eyes briefly. She knew this day might come eventually. She just never expected it to happen on his wedding day, or in a grocery store parking lot, or with Noah and Emma standing between them. "Mom?" Emma asks softly. Pinky forces a smile. "It's okay," but it clearly isn't. Ron quietly joins them. After greeting Pinky politely, his attention shifts toward the twins. The resemblance is impossible to ignore. Not identical, not exact copies, just enough similarities to make every adult uncomfortable. The shape of Noah's smile, Emma's eyes, their expressions, their mannerisms. Ron understands why Jim left the church. Anyone would have questions. Ron glances at his friend. Jim is trying not to stare, trying not to jump to conclusions, trying not to ask the question burning inside him, failing at all three. Eventually, Pinky agrees to sit with them at a nearby cafe. Nothing fancy, just a quiet place away from curious strangers. The twins sit together sharing a pastry. Meanwhile, Jim struggles to focus on anything except one detail: their age. 5. The number keeps returning. 5 years old. His mind automatically begins calculating. The breakup happened 6 years ago. The timeline fits, too perfectly. Jim takes a slow sip of coffee. His hands aren't as steady as he wants them to be. Across the table, Pinky notices, and she knows exactly why. For nearly 20 minutes, the conversation stays safe. Work, life, general updates, surface-level topics. Then the silence arrives, the kind that appears when both people know the real conversation can no longer be avoided. Jim looks at Noah, then Emma, then back at Pinky. His voice lowers. How old are they? Pinky already knows where this is heading. 5. The answer lands heavily. Nobody speaks for several seconds. Even Ron looks away, giving them privacy. Jim rubs his forehead. 5 years old, exactly as he feared, exactly as he suspected, exactly as he hoped. Jim lifts his eyes. Pinky. She immediately shakes her head. Not angry, not defensive, just tired, very tired. Don't. The word surprises him. Don't what? Ask that question here. Jim falls silent. The response tells him more than a direct answer would have. If there was nothing to hide, she would simply say no. Instead, she refuses to answer. And suddenly his pulse begins racing, because now he isn't wondering if there's a possibility. He's wondering how much of the truth he's missing. Emma looks between the adults. Are we in trouble? Pinky's expression softens instantly. No, sweetheart. Then why is everybody acting weird? No one has a good answer. As the twins finish eating, Pinky quietly speaks, not looking directly at Jim, looking at the table instead. There were things you never knew. Jim immediately focuses on her. What things? She hesitates. The memories clearly hurt. I tried reaching out. Jim blinks. What? I tried contacting you after we separated. The words hit him like a punch. His confusion is immediate. Silence. I wrote letters. More silence. I even went to your old apartment. Jim stares at her. Every sentence feels impossible, because none of it happened, at least not from his perspective. He never received letters, never received messages, never saw her, never heard from her, which leaves only one possibility. Something happened that neither of them understands. The twins begin gathering their things. The cafe grows busier around them. Yet Jim barely notices. His thoughts are racing. For 6 years he believed Pinky walked away. For 6 years he believed she chose silence. Now she's telling him a completely different story. A story that changes everything. Jim leans forward, his voice barely above a whisper. If you tried reaching me. He pauses, trying to process the impossible. Then why didn't I get any of it? Pinky's eyes fill with emotion, because that question has haunted her for years, and the answer may expose a truth neither of them is prepared to face. Before we uncover what really happened after their breakup, subscribe to Mr. Williams' Storytime and leave a comment below. Do you think Pinky is telling the truth, or is there still something she hasn't revealed? Because Jim Santos has just learned something that shouldn't be possible, and the deeper he digs into the past, the more complicated the truth becomes. The twins are distracted with coloring sheets a waitress brings to the table. For the first time since arriving at the cafe, Pinky and Jim have a small pocket of privacy. Not complete privacy, but enough. Jim leans forward, his attention fixed entirely on her. What do you mean you tried reaching me? Pinky takes a slow breath. The answer clearly isn't easy. After our argument, I waited. Jim lowers his eyes. He already hates where this conversation is going. I thought you'd cool off, Pinky continues. I thought you'd call. A painful smile touches her face. You never did. Neither of them enjoys hearing the truth, because both know exactly how stubborn they were back then. Back when they were younger, both believed time would fix everything. Jim assumed Pinky would eventually reach out. Pinky assumed Jim would eventually apologize. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. Neither wanted to be the first to surrender. Neither wanted to look desperate. Neither wanted to admit how much they were hurting. Now, sitting across from each other years later, the mistake feels painfully obvious. I was angry, Jim admits. I know. I thought you betrayed me. Pinky nods slowly. I know that too. The worst part isn't the argument anymore. It's realizing how unnecessary it all was. Pinky's fingers tighten around her coffee cup. There was something else. Jim immediately notices the shift in her voice. Something heavier, more serious. What? For a moment she doesn't answer. She glances toward Noah and Emma, then back toward Jim. 3 weeks after we split up, I found out I was pregnant. The words leave the air completely still. Ron nearly drops the cup he is holding. Jim stops breathing. Not literally, but close. The noise of the cafe fades. The conversations around them disappear. Only one sentence remains. 3 weeks after we split up, I found out I was pregnant. Jim struggles to find words. Why didn't you tell me? Pinky lets out a small laugh. Not because anything is funny, because the question hurts. I tried. The answer comes immediately. Firm, certain, honest. I called you several times. Jim frowns. I never got those calls. I left messages. I never heard them. Pinky shakes her head. I know. The frustration in her voice isn't directed at him. It's directed at the years they lost. Years that never should have disappeared. Years neither of them can recover. Pinky reaches into her purse. For several moments she searches quietly. Then she pulls out something old, folded, worn, carefully preserved. A letter. Jim stares at it. What is that? The last one I wrote. His heart pounds. Pinky places it gently on the table. I wrote 7. Jim's eyes widen. 7. She nods. I mailed 6. What happened? No response. The 7th letter was different. The 7th letter never left her possession because after 6 unanswered attempts, she finally convinced herself that Jim had made a choice. A painful choice. A permanent choice. Slowly, Pinky slides the letter across the table. Jim hesitates before opening it. The paper shows signs of age. Years have passed since it was written, yet the words remain. As his eyes move across the page, his chest tightens. The letter isn't angry. It isn't bitter. It isn't demanding. It's hopeful. Painfully hopeful. In it, Pinky explains the pregnancy. She tells him she's scared. She tells him she doesn't want to raise a child alone. Most of all, she tells him she still loves him. By the time Jim finishes reading, his vision is blurred. Because this isn't the letter of someone who wanted to leave. It's the letter of someone desperately trying to stay. Who handled your mail back then? Ron suddenly asks. The question catches everyone off guard. Pinky looks confused. Jim thinks for a moment. Then his expression changes. Back then his business was growing rapidly. He spent weeks traveling. His apartment manager often collected packages and forwarded important items. There was also someone else. Someone who handled personal correspondence when he was away. A former assistant. The realization hits him slowly. Then, all at once, the assistant had resigned unexpectedly months later, without explanation, without warning. At the time, Jim never thought much about it. Now he isn't so sure. Jim leans back in his chair, trying to process everything. If Pinky mailed letters, if she left messages, if she truly tried reaching him, then somebody or something got in the way. Not once, repeatedly. And suddenly the entire history of their breakup looks different. For years he believed Pinky abandoned him. For years Pinky believed Jim ignored her. Meanwhile, both may have been victims of circumstances neither understood. Ron studies his friend carefully. You realize what this means, right? Jim nods slowly. It means the story he spent 6 years believing may be completely wrong. The conversation ends far differently than it began. Not with answers, with bigger questions. As they prepare to leave, Jim looks at Noah and Emma laughing together near the window, 5 years old. His chest aches. Because every minute matters now. Every truth matters. Every lost year matters. And for the first time all day, one realization becomes impossible to ignore. If Pinky is telling the truth, then someone may have stolen 6 years from all of them. Before we continue, subscribe to Mr. Williams Storytime and leave a comment below. Do you believe their breakup was caused by bad timing, pride, or someone else's interference? Because Jim Santos has just discovered evidence that changes everything he thought he knew. And the next truth waiting for him may be even harder to accept. That evening, after leaving the cafe, Jim sits alone in his penthouse. The city stretches beyond the windows. Lights glow from hundreds of buildings, the kind of view people dream about. Normally it makes him feel accomplished. Tonight, it feels meaningless. His thoughts keep returning to Pinky, not the woman he loved years ago. The woman who spent 6 years raising 2 children without him. For the first time, Jim stops thinking about what he lost and starts thinking about what she endured. Because while he was building a company, Pinky was building a family, alone. The next day, Jim meets Pinky again. This time, there are no dramatic questions, no confrontations, just conversation, real conversation. As they walk through a neighborhood park while Noah and Emma play nearby, Pinky slowly begins sharing pieces of her life. She worked wherever she could, bookstores, offices, customer service jobs, weekend shifts, holiday shifts, extra shifts whenever bills piled up. Some days she barely slept. Some weeks she barely rested. Yet every morning she got up and did it again, not because she wanted to, because 2 children depended on her. Jim listens quietly. Every detail feels heavier than the last. Pinky tells him about the hardest period. The twins were still babies. Money was running low. One winter, Noah got sick. A week later, Emma got sick too. Pinky barely left their side. She slept in a chair between their beds, checking temperatures, giving medicine, watching the clock, praying both children would recover quickly. There were nights I was terrified, she admits. Jim lowers his head. He should have been there, not hearing about it years later. Actually there, helping, supporting, protecting. The realization stings more than he expected. Meanwhile, Noah and Emma are racing each other toward a playground bench. Halfway there, Noah turns around. "Mom," Pinky smiles. "What? Can we get ice cream later? If you finish your homework." Noah groans dramatically. Emma laughs. Watching them interact feels strangely natural to Jim. Then Pinky's expression softens. There was one thing that was always difficult. Jim already knows. He can see it in her eyes. The questions. What questions? Pinky looks toward the twins. The questions about their father. The words hit him immediately, because there is no answer she could give that would make those years easier. A memory returns to Pinky. One she clearly hasn't forgotten. Noah was 4 years old. They were attending a school event. Children were arriving with parents. Some came with mothers, some came with fathers, some came with both. Noah watched quietly for several minutes. Then he tugged on Pinky's sleeve. "Mom? Yes? Do I have a dad too?" Jim closes his eyes. Just hearing the question hurts. Pinky continues softly. "I didn't know what to say." Noah wasn't angry. He wasn't upset. He was simply curious, and somehow that made the question even harder. Emma handled things differently. She wasn't as direct. She paid attention, observed everything. One evening, while helping set the dinner table, she asked a simple question. "Mom, do you get lonely?" Pinky laughed sadly at the memory. Jim looks surprised. "She asked that?" Pinky nods, out of nowhere. "What did you tell her?" "I told her I was okay." Jim already knows that wasn't entirely true. Pinky loved her children deeply. But love doesn't erase loneliness. It doesn't erase uncertainty. It doesn't replace having someone beside you when life becomes overwhelming. The more Jim learns, the worse he feels. Not because Pinky blames him. She doesn't. In fact, she rarely speaks negatively about him. That somehow makes it harder. If she spent the entire conversation attacking him, he could defend himself. Instead, she simply tells the truth, and the truth leaves no place to hide. That evening, Jim sits in his car long after their meeting ends, thinking, replaying every detail, every missed birthday, every school event, every bedtime story, every scraped knee, every celebration, years of moments, gone. Not because he chose to abandon his children, because he never knew they existed. Yet the loss feels exactly the same. The following afternoon, Jim calls Ron. "I need certainty." Ron already understands. "The twins, yeah, you want a DNA test?" Jim looks out his office window. "Not because I doubt Pinky." "Then why?" "Because if I'm going to step into their lives, I need facts." Ron nods. It makes sense. Not for legal reasons, not for financial reasons, for emotional reasons. This situation already contains enough uncertainty. One clear answer could help everyone move forward. Later that day, Jim carefully brings up the subject with Pinky. She isn't offended. She isn't angry. She simply nods. "I expected you to ask." A few days later, the testing process is complete. Now all they can do is wait. And waiting turns out to be harder than any of them expected. Jim tries focusing on work, fails. Pinky tries maintaining normal routines, fails. Even Ron notices the tension growing, because everyone understands what those results represent. Not just biology, not just paperwork. A future, a family, a truth that can no longer remain uncertain. As Jim places his phone on his desk that evening, a notification suddenly appears. The laboratory has finished processing the results. His heart immediately begins racing, because the answer he has been chasing since that morning at the bus stop is finally waiting. Before we open those results, subscribe to Mr. Williams Storytime and leave a comment below. If you were in Jim's position, would you want a DNA test, or would Pinky's word be enough for you? Because after 6 years of questions, Jim Santos is only moments away from learning a truth that could change the rest of his life. The morning after the DNA results notification arrives, Jim knows there is something he can no longer postpone. Althea. Over the past several days, he has answered only the most necessary messages. His family is confused. Friends are divided. News of the interrupted wedding has traveled farther than he expected. But nobody deserves an explanation more than the woman he left standing at the altar. Jim sends a message asking if they can meet. To his surprise, her reply comes almost immediately. Name the place. No anger, no accusation, just 4 words. Somehow that makes it even harder. 2 hours later, Jim walks into a quiet restaurant overlooking a riverfront walkway. Althea is already there, waiting. When Jim sees her, guilt settles heavily inside him. Not because she looks angry. Because she doesn't. She looks composed, calm, dignified, strong. The kind of strength that appears after someone spends days processing disappointment alone. As Jim sits down, Althea studies him carefully. For several seconds, neither speaks. Finally, she breaks the silence. You look exhausted. Jim gives a weak smile. I haven't been sleeping much. I can tell. A server approaches. Neither orders much. Neither came for lunch. They came for answers. Althea folds her hands together. No reporters. No family. No guests. No rumors. Just me. Jim nods. She takes a breath, then asks the question she has every right to ask. What happened? No anger. No shouting. Just honesty. Jim looks down briefly, trying to find words that won't make the situation worse. Words that won't hurt her more than he already has. Unfortunately, no such words exist. So he tells the truth about the bus stop, about Pinky, about the twins, about the questions he couldn't ignore. Althea listens without interrupting, without judging, without reacting immediately. She simply listens. When Jim finishes speaking, silence settles between them. Finally, Althea nods, very slowly. As strange as this sounds. Jim looks up. I knew it wasn't only cold feet. The statement surprises him. What do you mean? Althea gives a small smile. The moment I saw your face at the ceremony, I knew something had changed. She remembers standing at the altar, watching him, studying him, the distance in his eyes, the distraction, the conflict. At the time, she didn't understand why. Now she does. And strangely enough, that understanding hurts less than uncertainty. Althea looks out toward the water for several moments, then turns back toward him. Her next question is much quieter, much more personal. Do you still love her? Jim closes his eyes. There it is, the question he has been avoiding. Not because he doesn't know the answer, because he does, and the answer carries consequences. For several long moments he says nothing. Althea notices, and somehow his silence tells her everything. A sad smile appears. You don't even have to say it. Jim's heart sinks, because she deserves honesty, even when honesty hurts. Many people would expect anger, maybe tears, maybe accusations. Instead, what follows is something far more painful, understanding. Althea isn't foolish, she isn't blind, and she isn't interested in forcing someone to love her. I care about you, Jim. The sincerity in her voice is unmistakable. I always will. Jim lowers his gaze. I never wanted to hurt you. I know, and none of this was planned. I know that too. Althea reaches for her glass, then quietly adds, but caring about someone isn't the same as being the person they're meant to be with. The words strike harder than any accusation could. For years they built a future together. Vacation plans, holiday traditions, business goals, a home they hoped to buy, a life they expected to share. Now both are sitting there watching that future disappear. Not because of betrayal, not because of cruelty, because life became complicated, messy, unexpected. Althea takes a deep breath. Can I ask one more thing? Of course, if those children are yours. She pauses. What are you going to do? This answer comes immediately, without hesitation, without uncertainty. I'm going to be there. For the first time all afternoon, Althea smiles, a genuine smile. Because despite everything, that is exactly what she hoped he would say. The conversation lasts another hour. Not every moment is easy, not every topic is comfortable, but both leave knowing they handled it the right way. Eventually they stand. The meeting is ending, so is a chapter of their lives. Althea looks at him. I hope you find the answers you're looking for. Jim nods. I hope you find someone who deserves you. She laughs softly. That's a nice thing to say after leaving me at the altar. For the first time, both of them laugh. A small moment, but a needed one. Then, without drama, they hug and say goodbye. Not enemies, not strangers, just two people whose paths were never meant to end in marriage. That evening, Jim returns home feeling lighter and heavier at the same time. Lighter because the conversation with Althea is finally behind him. Heavier because another conversation still awaits. The DNA results. The envelope remains unopened on his kitchen counter. He stares at it from across the room. One document, a few pages, a handful of words. Yet those pages may completely reshape his future. His phone vibrates. A message from Ron appears. "Have you opened it yet?" Jim looks at the envelope again, then types back 2 words. "Not yet." Because once he opens it, there will be no more uncertainty, only truth. Before we reveal what those results say, subscribe to Mr. Williams Storytime and leave a comment below. Do you think Althea handled the situation with grace, or would most people have reacted differently? Because Jim Santos is finally holding the answer that has haunted him since the day he saw Pinky and the twins at that bus stop. And the next few minutes may change his life forever. The apartment is completely silent. For nearly 20 minutes, Jim has been staring at the sealed envelope sitting on his kitchen counter. It isn't large. It isn't dramatic. Yet it feels heavier than anything he has ever held. Business contracts worth millions never made him nervous. Court documents never made him nervous. High-stakes negotiations never made him nervous. This does. Because money can be earned again. Opportunities can return. Lost years cannot. Jim pours himself a glass of water, sets it down untouched, walks toward the window, then back toward the counter. Finally, he picks up the envelope. His hands aren't steady. And for the first time in a very long time, Jim Santos is afraid of what comes next. Most of him already knows. Deep down, he has known since that moment at the bus stop. The resemblance was too strong. The timing was too precise. The connection felt too immediate. Yet feelings are not facts, and facts matter, especially when children are involved. He carefully breaks the seal, pulls out the documents. His eyes move across the first page, then the second, then the section that matters most. Everything inside him goes still. For several moments, Jim simply stares, reading the same sentence again, and again, and again. Not because he doesn't understand it, because he does. The report confirms what his heart suspected. Noah Farrell is his son. Emma Farrell is his daughter. The results leave no room for doubt, no room for interpretation, no room for argument. The twins are his children. A strange sound escapes him, half laugh, half sob. Then emotion crashes into him all at once. Jim lowers himself into a chair. The papers remain in his hands, but his mind is somewhere else. Birthday candles, first words, first steps, school pictures, bedtime stories, all the moments parents treasure, gone. Not because he rejected them, not because he chose another life, because he never knew. The realization is devastating. He presses both hands against his face, and for the first time since this journey began, he allows himself to cry. Not quietly, not carefully, openly. The grief is real, because although he has just gained 2 children, he is also mourning 6 years he can never reclaim. Less than an hour later, Ron lets himself into the apartment. One look at Jim tells him everything. The unopened bottle of water, the documents on the table, the redness in Jim's eyes. Ron slowly sits down. Positive? Jim nods, unable to speak immediately. Ron exhales, not surprised, just affected, because this stopped being a simple question days ago. These are children now, real children, children with names, personalities, dreams, questions, a son, a daughter, a family. After a long silence, Ron asks softly, "How are you holding up?" Jim laughs sadly, "I don't know." And for once, that's the most honest answer possible. Meanwhile, Pinky sits alone after putting Noah and Emma to bed. Their backpacks are ready for school. Their lunches are prepared. Their room is quiet. Normally, evenings follow a predictable routine. Tonight, nothing feels normal. She knows the results are available. She knows Jim probably has them already. And she knows one phone call could change everything. Part of her hopes he calls. Part of her fears he will. Not because she doubts him, because certainty changes things. Questions can be ignored. Facts cannot. If the results confirm what she already knows, then life moves into unfamiliar territory. And that is frightening, even when it's something you've secretly wanted for years. Jim finally gathers enough courage to dial her number. Pinky answers after the second ring. "Hello?" For a moment he can't speak. The emotion returns immediately. "Jim?" His voice finally emerges, barely above a whisper. "I got the results." Silence. A long silence. Not because she doesn't know, because hearing it aloud makes everything real. Finally she asks, "What did they say?" Jim closes his eyes, then speaks the words he never imagined saying. "They're mine." The silence on the other end becomes even longer. When Pinky finally responds, her voice is shaking. I know. Years of emotion exist inside those two words. Years. The conversation lasts almost 2 hours, longer than any conversation they've had since reconnecting. For the first time, they begin discussing the future instead of the past. Not romance, not reconciliation. The children, school schedules, activities, responsibilities. How to introduce major changes carefully. How to protect Noah and Emma emotionally. How to make sure they feel safe. Every decision centers around the twins, and surprisingly neither argues, because both want the same thing. What's best for the children. Near the end of the call, Jim says something that catches Pinky off guard. I don't want to rush into anything. She listens quietly. I know I missed 6 years. His voice grows firmer. But I don't want to miss another day. The following Saturday, Pinky agrees to something important. Not because she feels pressured, not because she feels guilty, because she believes it's time. Jim will spend an afternoon with Noah and Emma, not as a stranger, not as a family friend, as the man who is slowly becoming part of their lives. As the call ends, Jim places his phone down and stares into the distance. Excited, terrified, hopeful, all at once, because finding out he was a father was difficult. Actually becoming one may be even harder. Before we continue, subscribe to Mr. Williams Storytime and leave a comment below. If you were Noah and Emma, would you want to know the truth immediately, or would you prefer the adults take things slowly? Because next, Jim Santos will face a challenge no business success could ever prepare him for. Learning how to become a father to 2 children who have spent their entire lives without him. Saturday arrives much faster than Jim expected. For someone who spent years speaking confidently in boardrooms and negotiating multi-million-dollar deals, standing outside Pinky's house feels surprisingly intimidating. He checks the time, then checks it again. He arrived 20 minutes early. Not because he had to, because he couldn't stop thinking about today. Inside the house, Noah peeks through the curtain. Mom. Pinky looks up from the kitchen. What? He's here. Emma immediately runs toward the window. Already? The twins press their faces against the glass. Outside, Jim notices movement. He raises a hand and waves. Emma waves back enthusiastically. Noah tries to act less excited, fails completely. Pinky watches quietly. For years she imagined this meeting. Now it is finally happening. And suddenly nobody knows exactly what to say. Rather than choosing an expensive activity, Jim keeps things simple. The city's science museum, a place filled with interactive exhibits, experiments, and hands-on displays. The moment they arrive, Noah's eyes light up. Emma immediately starts asking questions. Lots of questions. Questions about dinosaurs, questions about space, questions about robots, questions about things Jim has never even considered. By the second exhibit, Emma has already asked 12 questions. Do you know everything? She asks him seriously. Jim laughs. Definitely not. What do you know? Enough to get through today. Emma considers that answer carefully, then nods, apparently satisfied. Noah's more cautious, not distant, just careful. The boy clearly likes Jim, but he's still figuring out where Jim fits into his life. While exploring a flight simulator exhibit, Noah finally speaks up. You really build houses? Not exactly. Jim smiles. I help create communities where people live. Noah thinks about that. That's cool. The simple compliment means more than Jim expected. A few minutes later, Noah points toward another exhibit. Come on. The words are small, ordinary. Yet something about them feels significant. Because for the first time, Noah isn't following because his mother asked him to. He's choosing to. Throughout the afternoon, Pinky remains nearby. Not hovering, not interfering, simply observing. At one point, she notices something that catches her attention. Jim kneels to Emma's height while answering a question. Completely focused, completely patient. Not checking emails, not looking at his phone, not distracted. Present, genuinely present. The sight surprises her, not because she doubted he cared, because she forgot how attentive he could be when something truly mattered. For years she raised the twins alone, learning to handle every challenge herself. Now another person is carrying part of that responsibility. The adjustment feels strange, but not unpleasant. After leaving the museum, they stop at a small family-owned ice cream shop. Nothing fancy, just a local place with outdoor tables. Noah orders chocolate. Emma changes her mind 3 times before finally deciding. Jim pays while trying not to laugh. You make every decision this difficult? Emma nods confidently. Important decisions. The answer earns laughter from everyone. As they sit outside eating, a comfortable rhythm begins forming. Conversation flows naturally. Stories are shared. Jokes appear, the awkwardness slowly fades. Then Emma says something unexpected. "You're funny." Jim raises an eyebrow. "Thanks," she shrugs. "I thought you'd be boring." Pinky nearly chokes on her drink. Jim bursts out laughing, because years ago someone else used to say exactly the same thing. The weeks that follow become even more important than that first outing. Anyone can make a good first impression. Consistency is harder. Jim starts showing up regularly. School events, weekend activities, homework sessions, soccer practice, dance recitals. The twins begin expecting him, trusting him, relying on him, and every time he promises something, he follows through. If he says he'll arrive at 4 o'clock, he's there before 4. If he says he'll attend an event, he attends. No excuses, no cancellations, no broken promises. Slowly, the foundation of something meaningful begins taking shape. Several months later, Jim helps Noah assemble a model airplane. The project has already taken much longer than expected, mostly because Noah keeps getting distracted. Finally, one piece refuses to fit correctly. Frustrated, Noah sighs, then casually says, "Dad, can you hold this?" The room goes silent. Noah freezes. Jim freezes. Even Pinky looks up from across the room. The word hangs there, unexpected, unplanned, real. Noah immediately turns red. Jim gently places a hand on his shoulder. "It's okay." Noah studies his face carefully. "You don't mind?" Jim's eyes grow emotional. Not even a little. That evening, after the twins are asleep, Pinky and Jim sit on the back porch. For a while, they simply enjoy the quiet. Eventually, Pinky speaks. "They trust you." Jim nods. "I hope so." "No," she smiles softly. "They do." The statement means everything, because trust was always the real issue. Not the years apart, not the misunderstandings. Trust. For the first time in a long while, Pinky notices herself relaxing around him. Not completely, not all at once, but enough to imagine possibilities she once believed were gone forever. Then Jim says something unexpected. "There's somewhere I'd like to take you." Pinky already knows the answer before he says it. "The lake," Jim smiles. The lake. A few days later, the twins spend the evening with Pinky's sister. For the first time since reconnecting, Jim and Pinky have several uninterrupted hours together. As the sun begins lowering across the horizon, Jim drives toward a place neither of them has visited in years. A place filled with memories, dreams, promises, regrets, and unfinished feelings. Pinky watches the familiar road appear ahead. Neither speaks much, neither needs to, because both understand what this meeting represents. The lake isn't just a location, it's the place where their story began, and perhaps the place where a new chapter is about to start. Before we continue, subscribe to Mr. Williams Storytime and leave a comment below. Do you think Pinky should give Jim a second chance after everything they've been through? Because Jim Santos is about to return to the place where he first imagined a future with Pinky Farrell, and this time he has something important he needs to say. The drive to the lake feels strangely familiar, not because the route has changed very little over the years, because the emotions feel familiar, the anticipation, the uncertainty, the hope. For long stretches, neither Jim nor Pinky says much. The silence isn't uncomfortable. It never used to be. And somehow, despite everything that happened between them, it still isn't. As the lake finally comes into view, Pinky smiles. "It's smaller than I remember." Jim laughs. "No, it definitely is. We just got older." That answer earns a genuine laugh from her, one he hasn't heard enough of, one he realizes he missed more than he ever admitted. They walk toward the same wooden dock where they spent countless evenings years ago. Time has left its mark. The wood has been repaired in places. A few nearby trees have grown taller. Some details are different. Most are not. Pinky pauses near the edge. "You remember the first time we came here?" Jim smiles immediately. "You made fun of my shoes." "They were terrible. They were practical. They were ugly." Jim laughs. "That's not the same thing." "It absolutely is." The familiar exchange makes both of them smile. For a moment it feels as though 6 years never happened. Then reality quietly returns, because 6 years did happen, and neither can pretend otherwise. Eventually they sit at the edge of the dock. The lake stretches peacefully before them. For a while they simply watch the water. Then Jim finally speaks. "I spent years blaming you." Pinky remains quiet, not because she's angry, because she's listening. "I thought you left." His voice softens. "I thought you chose a different life." Pinky lowers her eyes. "And I thought you stopped caring." The honesty hurts, yet it also feels necessary. Neither is trying to win. Neither is trying to prove a point. For the first time in years, they're simply telling the truth. Jim exhales slowly. "There are things I'll regret for the rest of my life." Pinky turns toward him. What things? Not listening. The answer comes instantly, without hesitation, without excuses. I was hurt. He nods. I know that. I was angry. I know that too. The lake. But none of that justifies how I handled things. Pinky studies him carefully. People often apologize to end a conversation. This feels different. This feels genuine. Not because he's trying to get something, because he finally understands what was lost. For years, Pinky imagined telling him how difficult everything had been. Yet now that the opportunity exists, she finds herself focusing on something else. Not the hardship, not the struggle, the loneliness. There were so many moments I wanted to call you. Jim closes his eyes. Every sentence still hurts. Birthdays. She pauses. School plays. Another pause. Random days when one of the kids did something funny. A sad smile touches her face. I kept thinking you would have loved it. Jim swallows hard. Because she's right. He would have. Every single moment. As the sun begins lowering toward the horizon, Jim turns toward her. He has rehearsed versions of this conversation in his head. Long speeches, perfect words, carefully planned explanations. Now none of them seem right. So instead, he tells the truth. The simplest version. I still love you. Pinky looks away immediately. Not because she doesn't care, because she does. And that's exactly what makes the moment difficult. Jim doesn't rush, doesn't pressure, doesn't demand an answer. He simply continues. I never stopped. The words hang gently between them, waiting. For several moments, Pinky says nothing. The lake remains quiet. A soft breeze moves across the water. Finally, she looks at him. The same man she loved years ago. Older now, wiser, a little more tired, a little more careful, but still him. You hurt me. I know. I spent years trying to move forward. I know. And trusting people again wasn't easy. I know. Jim accepts every word, because every word is true. Then Pinky does something he never expected. She reaches for his hand. Not dramatically, not suddenly, just naturally, the way she used to. I still love you too. For a moment neither speaks, neither needs to. Some victories are too meaningful for words. 1 year later, family and close friends gather beside that same lake. No luxury venue, no massive guest list, no media attention, no pressure, just the people who genuinely belong there. Noah stands proudly beside Jim. Emma refuses to stop smiling. Ron serves as best man once again, this time under very different circumstances. As Pinky walks toward the ceremony area, Jim feels something he didn't feel during the first wedding. Certainty, complete certainty. Not because life is perfect, because it isn't. Not because the past disappeared, because it didn't. Because everyone standing there fought their way through the truth to reach this moment. After the ceremony, guests gather near the water. Children run across the grass. Laughter fills the evening. At one point, Pinky nudges Jim lightly. Remember what I asked you years ago? Jim smiles immediately. Which part? When I told you not to become boring. He laughs. I remember. Pinky folds her arms. Well? Jim looks toward Noah and Emma, toward Ron, toward the lake, toward the woman who never truly left his heart. Then he grins. Safe to say life didn't give me that option. Pinky laughs. The same laugh that first caught his attention years ago. And in that moment, Jim finally understands something that took him far too long to learn. Success isn't the buildings he constructed. It isn't the money he earned. It isn't the recognition he received. It's this: family, forgiveness, trust rebuilt through actions, and the courage to choose love when life offers a second chance. Before you go, subscribe to Mr. Williams Storytime, like this video, and share it with someone who believes people can find their way back to each other. And tell us in the comments, do you believe Jim and Pinky were always meant to find their way back together, or do you think second chances have to be earned? Because sometimes the most important journey isn't becoming successful. It's finding your way home.